this is a tree. And this is how many trees I have chopped down in my hardcore world so far. And this is how many trees I'm going to need to finish my mega base, which is a really big problem. I'll need at least 1,000 stacks of wood to finish this base, and it takes 2.5 seconds to chop one tree down, meaning I'll need about 13,000 trees, or 9 hours of tree chopping, and that's not cool. So instead, I spent 30 hours building this machine that farms wood for me. But to build this farm, I need a place to put it, and to get a place to put it, I need to do a lot of digging. But to do a lot of digging, I need more beacons. But to get beacons, I need to kill wither skeletons. Oh yeah, I also need to power this farm with bone meal. How much bone meal, you ask? 3 bone meal every single second. So yeah, to build this farm, I will need to first build 10 other farms. Let's talk about that. Starting with farm number 1, a wither skeleton farm. You see, the entire reason I'm building this farm is to get unlimited wood with minimal effort, so that I can use the wood to keep building my underground mega base, which by the way, I've decided to call the Undergrowth. But that's a very big problem, because while this place is big, I wouldn't call it mega. And even worse yet, the whole thing is underground, so one beacon that I have now won't suffice. I reckon I'll need at least 4 more to cover this whole area. Now in the last episode, I spent 3 hours killing wither skeletons for one single beacon, so by that math, I'll need to spend 12 more hours collecting skulls for the other beacons. Instead, I'm gonna spend like 5 hours building this wither skelly farm, because 5 is less than 12. In fact, last time it took so long to find a good fortress that I had to go more than 3,000 blocks from spawn before I found this one. Luckily, the spawn rates here are really good, so I can quickly turn this into a pretty functional wither skeleton farm, at least for my single player world. With all that said, let's build this thing. The first step in building this farm is to spawn proof the entire fortress so that nothing can spawn. This will help concentrate all spawns to the spawn platform when the farm is complete, as well as act like a nice safety net so I don't die while building it. This fortress has multiple crossroads, which are these plus shaped areas that spawn lots of mobs. I'm gonna build my farm in this middle one here. I made the platform 19 by 19 to maximize spawns and filled in the outside box, making sure to build the ceiling tall enough so that the wither boys could still spawn. It was also a good excuse to use some of this amethyst that I've been collecting, and this tinted glass looks really nice. Believe it or not, the farm was pretty much done at this point, minus one key ingredient, but don't worry, I'll make a farm for that one later. In fact, I was headed home to get the things to make that second farm when I noticed I only had 2 rockets. No big deal, I'll just go into my rocket box and get some more. Oh yeah, this is a problem. 3,000 blocks from home in the nether, and I have no rockets. Yeah, so instead I built a big staircase up to the nether roof, and it was time for the painful task of digging a really long tunnel. It took 3 hours and looked a little something like this. I got home and crafted some rockets, but after realizing that I'm far too lazy to manually collect sugarcane, I figured a farm for that would be necessary. But I did some research and I found this pretty compact design by Tango Tech, and I think it'll work perfectly in my base. This is what you need for one module of the farm, but that's a problem because one module won't be enough. I'm thinking if I build 16 modules, it will give me enough paper for all of my rockets, plus a bunch of extra sugarcane to help fuel my tree farm. More on that later though. But to do this, I will need 4 stacks of pistons, which means 4 stacks of iron, but I only have 3 stacks of iron, and I don't want to go mining. So it's on to farm number 2, an iron farm. Are you with me so far? I'm making an iron farm to give me pistons, to make a sugarcane farm to give me rockets, to let me fly to the wither skeleton farm, which will give me beacons, thus allowing me to clear out the space to build my infinite tree farm. Pretty simple. Now, even the most basic iron farms produce quite a lot of iron over time if you build them in the spawn chunks, which is really good for me because my base is super close to world spawn. And because it's just me who plays in this world, I kept things simple and built this single zombie designed by Logical Geek Boy. You've probably seen it like a million times. I started building this water elevator and connecting it up with these beds that the villagers would eventually stand on. One large line of rails later, brought to you by the oh so underrated furnace minecart, nudging the villagers into the water. All I had to do was wait for nighttime so I could remove the surrounding blocks, leaving them safe and sound on top of their beds for eternity. But there was a problem because this guy didn't want to sleep. As it turns out, he likes this other guy's bed better on the other side of the farm. But he had really good balance, so it actually worked out. From there, I built out the spawning platforms, lured in a zombie, which I named Mildew 2.0, and then turned on the farm. Easy peasy. After an hour of refreshing my YouTube homepage, wondering when the hell Not Brock's gonna ever upload again, I had enough iron to move on to farm number 3, which, you guessed it, is the sugarcane farm. Quite a few of you guys mentioned in the last episode that while you liked the build overall, you thought it was lacking a bit of detail. And firstly, ouch. Second, you're right. That's because there's so much more I want to build in this area still, starting with this sugarcane farm, which I think will fit perfectly into the sidewall. Thanks to my beacon, clearing out a large area to work with was no problem, and I could begin laying out the first of the modules. The cool thing about this farm is you can expand it along all 3 axes, which allowed me to customize it to fit into my base area. I went with a 2 wide, 2 long, and 4 tall layout, and then proceeded to have have a hell of a time figuring out how to incorporate this monstrosity into the base and make it look good, but we got there in the end, I think. Luckily though, this farm was really compact and it's lossless, meaning I had enough sugarcane in 1 hour to easily fill up my rocket box. Now that I could safely fly back to the Wither Skeleton farm, it was time to turn it on and start collecting Wither Skulls, right? Wrong. The farm still needed Wither Roses in order to allow only Wither Skeletons to spawn, and that's where farm number 4 comes in. Luckily for me, ENX04 just released an instant Wither Rose farm, and I was hesitant, but this thing is actually insane. The farm barely used any redstone and relied on trapping a wither under the bedrock end portal, and then using that wither to kill snowmen. Not to mention, I could go back underneath of the farm after it was done, get all the snow that they dropped, and then use that snow to resummon them back into the farm. So it felt a bit more humane than using chicken, maybe? I don't know, dude, it's a video game. But in the span of 20 minutes, I had like 8 stacks of these things, which meant I could finally go back to the wither farm, replace the floor with netherrack, and then put down the Wither Roses. And there you have it, folks. A fully functional, super effective Wither Skeleton farm in about 5 hours. Oh yeah. You see, the farm actually sucked. So earlier, when I said the spawn rates here were really good, what I meant was that the spawn rates here were actually really bad. It turns out that basalt deltas spawn like a ton of magma cubes, so even with the fortress spawn proof, my rates were pretty trash. So I had to rebuild the entire farm. Okay, just kidding. I did not do that. I did do something very bad though. Okay, not really. In reality, I just turned my render distance down a little bit to improve the spawn rates. And no, I don't care if you think it's cheating, but you can feel free to yell at me and down in the comments. Cool beans. It was time to kill a bunch of withers, and I thought I would give myself a little challenge and fight all 5 of them out in the open at the same exact time. And by fight all 5 of them out in the open in the same exact time, what I really meant was suffocate them one by one under the end portal. Time to make some beacons. But not before making farm number 5 a carrot farm. You're probably wondering, Brock, what in the heck does a carrot farm have to do with any of this? And honestly, valid question. You see, I think a fun challenge for myself in this world is to not make beacons out of iron blocks, because once you have an iron farm, they just feel too easy to get. So instead, this carrot farm will give me plenty of carrots to trade with my cured farmers at a large discount. Think of it like this: every carrot this farm produces equals 1 emerald for me. And that's a good thing, because I need almost 6,000 emeralds for the beacons I want. But first, I had to find where to build this thing. I dug through this wall, and to my surprise, there was a massive cave, and I immediately knew I would build a bunch of farms in here. I got to work building up the first layer, but needed some test subjects. So I dug a new tunnel and rerouted my villager line. Pretty easy. Now I had to just push this guy along. Wait a second, villagers don't take fall damage in minecarts, right? Anyways, I played it safe and just put some water down at the bottom, and soon enough, the first layer was complete. This farm is by Logical Geek Boy, and the only change that I made in my design was to build it double the size, so it was 4 layers tall instead of 2 layers tall. It works by having these farmer villagers collect crops all day and then share the carrots with their cellmate in an attempt to make love. But not before my birth controlling hopper minecarts steal the carrots right out of thin air. Moving all the villagers was a pain in the butt, but it didn't take too long once I got in the groove. But why settle for carrot trades when I could have carrot and potato trades? Which brings me on to farm number 6. This is the same design as my carrot farm, but it uses potatoes instead of carrots. Who wrote this script? But why settle for carrot and potato trades when I could have carrot, potato, pumpkin, and melon trades? Which brings me onto farm number 7. This is a classic farm design by Ilmango, where an observer detects when a pumpkin or melon grows, which then instantly triggers a piston to fire and break the item, which is then collected by this hopper minecart below the system. I used a 16 by 16 design, which produces a pretty insane yield of crops. This meant that I could finally use all of these crops to trade with my farmers, and after about an hour of work, I had enough emeralds for 4 more beacons. I decided it was best to make the beacon I currently had the central beacon, and then from there place a haste 2 beacon 100 blocks out in each direction, which means basically anywhere I go near my base, I'll be able to instant mine. Speaking of instant mine, it was time to dig another really big hole for my 8th farm, which is a cactus farm. Okay, now you're really probably wondering, Brock, how does a cactus farm have anything to do with a tree farm? And once again, valid question. But before I tell you why, let's build this thing. This farm works by placing fence posts 1 block up and over from a cactus, such that when it grows, the top layer is immediately broken and then flushed into this water collection system. That's pretty much it. Using this simple concept, I was able to turn this into a multi-layer, pretty dang efficient cactus farm. And you know I had to decorate it too. Finally, it was time for farm number 9, the tree farm. Hold up, wait. You said that you were gonna build 10 farms so you didn't have to chop wood anymore. Why is this tree farm only the 9th farm? Don't worry, I'll get to that. First things first, I had to decide where to build this thing. And now that I had a Haste 2 mining power basically in every direction, I decided to expand the undergrove into the opposite direction. After clearing out this tunnel, I knew it was time to start digging a massive room. How big? I had no idea. All I knew was to make a massive room and I'd figure out the rest of it later. The tree farm design was by Logical Geek Boy. Noticing a trend here, and it was really simple as far as fully auto tree farms go. Place a sapling which is instantly bone mealed to grow a tree. Then that tree is immediately pushed along by a row of pistons as well as cleared of its leaves by these pistons on the side. And ultimately it's fed into this water chamber where it's blown up and collected by this TNT duper. And yes, I am using a TNT duper because unlimited boom boom equals Brock stay happy. But there was a problem because I still needed a way to fuel this tree farm. And what if I told you that this final farm was the solution to this problem? What if I told you that the sugarcane, carrot, potato, pumpkin, melon, and cactus farms would all come together to help make this final farm? Yeah, we're making a bone meal farm. You see, this tree farm requires a ton of bone meal. As I mentioned earlier, 3 bone meal every single second. And I wanted a way to resupply it automatically without having to constantly load it myself. The idea was simple. The items from my other farms would get funneled into these composters, which then turns everything into bone meal, which goes on to power the tree farm. But to do this requires some clever item transport mechanisms, and this is where I wanted to have some fun and let my creativity shine a little bit. Hooking up 6 separate farms into one water collection system isn't a very complicated idea, but I knew if I made it very complex, it would look really cool. One of my main goals with the undergrove is to make it really feel alive, and one of the main ways I'm doing that is with things like this slime block launcher. Its design is really simple, and once I had it built, I loaded it with items and made a note of roughly where they were being launched to, and then dug out a hole for the items to land in. It's pretty simple. The items from my farms get funneled into the slime block launcher, where they are shot up into a long and convoluted water stream full of glass tubing so I can see them traveling basically anywhere in my base. From there, they funnel into the composters, get turned to bone meal, and then sent off to power the tree farm. Very overcomplicated? Yes. Do I regret it? No. So finally, this begs the question, do the 6 separate mega farms produce enough bone meal to let me run this farm for a long time? I was really tired of doing math, so instead I turned the farm on for a test run. And after 15 minutes of AFKing, I had went through almost an entire double chest of bone meal, so yeah, no, not even close. But I did get over 35 stacks of logs, which I could use for the decoration in this room. I want this tree farm room to feel like the central core that powers the base as I continue to expand upon it, and I think it does a good job of telling that story. The entire ceiling is covered with these tree roots that keeps the same aesthetic I've been going for, but I also have a bunch of magma cubes in the ceiling, which makes it look like it's being powered by like molten lava. I don't know, dude, it looks really cool though. So yeah, I spent 30 hours building a tree farm that I can only run for like 15 minutes at a time. But yeah, I guess that means I gotta figure out how to get more bone meal over to this thing, so please let me know if you have any suggestions on that. I guess in the meantime, I'll just keep on chopping trees.